I'm here at Magfest with Blerdcon founder Hilton George. Thank you for speaking with me.
Sure thing.
I'd like to start by asking about Blerdcon. Can you describe it, explain it to me?
Yes, Blerdcon is a new convention on its second year that is focused on diversity and inclusion in gaming, anime, cosplay, and sci-fi. The word blurred is an amalgam of the words black and nerd. So black nerds, i.e. blurs, are being highlighted and celebrated and represented in a way at this convention that you don't always see at others. We've also invited other intersectional communities like the LGBTQ, Latinx, people with disabilities, veterans, groups that have also been underrepresented in their various fandoms in the geek world. And we've created a great 3-day con with 24-hour programming on a scale of the cons that everyone wants to attend. So this is our year 2 coming up in July, so we're really excited.
So I guess the first year must have gone well, and so you're continuing.
Yes, we were pleasantly surprised at the response. Typical first-year conventions will bring in around 600 or so first-year attendees. We had about 1,800. It was universally positive overall as far as the experience of the people who came. So the word of mouth and things like that are what you're hoping for. So for year 2, we're expecting between 3,000 and 5,000. And then there's a little bit of pressure to try to, top what you did last year, but then also keep all the core elements that everyone loved. But then adding that little X factor for the people who are coming back to see something new, keep it growing and keep it going.
Do you ever get comments from people who might get confused and think, oh, is this a con only for black people? Or
It happens a lot, yes. What I tell people is that there's 2 examples. So, for instance, Otakon is literally, the celebration of Japanese culture. But no one feels odd about not being Japanese and going to Otakon, right?
Right.
So we want that same type of dynamic where we create an event that does have blurred culture first and foremost in the menu, but it's inclusive for everyone to come and participate. And we want everybody to come and have a great time, and we had all races, all gender, all age groups represented this last year. And, creating a comfortable space where people are able to see and experience things that they might not typically see at their local convention or their favorite con, kind of really makes what Blerdcon is what it is. So it was a really, really great balance that we were able to thread, and the people had a great time, and we're hoping to replicate that again for next year.
As a science fiction fan, I've seen more interest in sci-fi from outside of the sort of English-speaking world, and I know African, continent. Science fiction is really getting more study and interest. So I'm wondering, would Blerdcon have any kind of panels or focus on, that sort of, different science fiction?
Yes, absolutely. The colloquial term for it is Afro-futurism.
Right.
And we've had a couple of panelists and guests last year who came and did some panels. They were representing and selling their books as vendors and as artists. I think you're going to see a lot more emphasis on that after the dawn of Black Panther. The movie comes out in February, which is almost literally Afro-futurism, in the plot, in the design, in the cast, and in every way.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be a spotlight that's going to bring a whole lot of that to the surface, and a lot more artists and writers and creators. So we're really excited about bringing in more of that than we even brought in year 1. But it's a very robust genre. It's a very robust creative community. And we definitely had 120 panels. And I think we might have had maybe 10-15% of that focused specifically on Afrofuturism. So it was really, really a great thing to add. And we'll definitely do it again this year.
Are you able to bring in any of the Black Panther cast, crew, anyone in this? Any?
Well, typically with a genie, you only get 3 wishes. So, I had to use a couple of them up till now.
Yeah.
If I can get a 4th wish, that would definitely be it.
Yeah.
But we are working on that. And as a matter of fact, I got a line in on a couple of creators and people who are working behind the scenes, and some people who are on the front of the scenes of that, Infinity Wars, and the Marvel Marketplace.
Yeah.
So, yes, I've told my guest coordinators that, anyone from Wakanda,
Yeah.
give me the key grip. The guy holding the camera steady for that one shot, we'll take him, because I think it's going to be an amazing movie, and the reverberations through the blurred community are going to be huge.
Oh, yeah. All right. So, Have you worked on other conventions in any capacity before?
Not as a volunteer. We partnered with, good gosh, we've had advisors from Otakon, Magfest has been supporting us, Anime USA, Anime NYC. There's probably a dozen conventions of various kinds for which the committees and the con organizers, founders, and con chairs kind of took me under their wing. This has been about 2.5 years in the making, and I showed up on the scene long before I debuted the website, long before any flyers for Blerdcon went out. I was at the conference for con runners in LA, introducing myself to all of these convention runners from Anime X on down, and just asking for advice. Things definitely to do, things not to do. I was able to shadow a lot of the con runners and con organizers during their cons in the lead up to Blerdcon. And I think that their help is what made Blerdcon as special an experience as it was, because a lot of the landmines that a first year con typically run into, I think we were structurally able to avoid. It is a very supportive community, especially in anime and gaming cons. This is something that they deem to be important. And even if they don't have the structural DNA to bring something like this about within their own convention, they recognize the need for it in the fandom, and they're happy to assist a new type of convention like ours to take on the task. And it's just been great. It's like a whole new family.
What inspires you?
I like seeing people stepping outside of the box. I like seeing people thinking in new ways. Geeks are almost defined as that. Being a weirdo is a label that you could attach to anyone who's ever achieved greatness, especially in the science fields and the creative fields and the things that have moved society forward, both socially, technologically, and we are coming into a culture now where there's a spread and a rise of geek culture that is going mainstream. What I'm hoping we're able to do as geeks, as a community of geeks, and you can't tell I'm gesturing to both him and I when I do this, is that we can create a community that even when Disney comes and buys all of this out, and it kind of takes it out of the grassroots, that the cement will have dried in such a way that STEM outreach, creative, inspiration for our kids, our grandkids who are going to be coming through this geek culture that won't even be known as geek culture to them.
Right.
It's going to inspire the next genius to not feel weird about being weird.
Right.
And understand that being weird can be a really positive thing. Even if you have, if you're on a autism spectrum, or if you have a disability, or if your community is completely full of geeks, there's so much that you can do, and seeing that future for them, I think, is what makes me see the importance of what we're doing here right now.
So, what is your most important process or tool in developing the convention? Is there something that, helped make it happen?
People. A singular vision does not bring about a convention. You have got to find allies. You have to find people to inspire enough to inspire other people, and it's almost like a pyramid, scheme in a way that I might inspire one person who then has a group of people that they go and inspire, and then they go and inspire people. And what will happen is that people are coming in and bringing their skills, they're bringing their energy, they're bringing their time and their effort to help shape a convention. I can't put on a convention by myself, no one can. And so I make sure I give full credit to all the organizing committees and the volunteers and the advocates and the partners and sponsors that help bring a vision to fruition. So that's the most important thing, is the people. Without the people and without their shared effort, none of what we're doing or seeing or standing in is possible. So that's absolutely it.
Is there an element of this process that you enjoy the most, and why?
I love talking with people and sharing the vision. We're a new con, and there may come a time where Blerdcon becomes so popular and so well known that people aren't asking the ground level questions that we're discussing here, because it'll be so common knowledge or so understood. But I like, being on panels. I like representing the con at tables. I like sharing our story on social media, or going into classrooms, or just spreading the word, because it is something that is necessary. It is something that people have been waiting for, and the more people that we can share that with, they're the value. The people are what make all of this fun. Yes, the games are great, and the panels are awesome, and the music is amazing, but it's the people that are the connective tissue and the energy that makes it all fun. Otherwise, it's just a giant Dave and Buster's, right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes this different, is the people.
Yeah. How did you start this? Why did you get into it, and why are you continuing?
I was a geek before I knew that there was a name for it, and as a black nerd, we share a really weird relationship with the geek diaspora, the geek experience. So every geek has felt, separated and marginalized in some way or another. They made a movie series about it in the 80s, like 16 sequels about nerd torture. Remember Revenge of the Nerds? That really it was an allegory for something that's a real phenomenon in society, right?
Yeah.
The black nerd experience is different because oftentimes we experience, yes, the same ostracization that other geeks and nerds have felt, but then within our own community, we're often rejected from our own blackness. And so speaking proper English or being into anime or comic books or wearing a comic book shirt come up is less prevalent now in some of these ways than others than it was then. But our experience has been a double level of separation. So for the black nerd community, an event like this is it's a reaffirmation that your geekness and your blackness can coexist and not be mutually exclusive. And what we're hoping to do, and one of the things that again that really is important is making sure that remains kind of a core message, because there is an audience there that really needs to hear it. Because we're kind of behind the curve on a lot of things in the geek community because we are in a bubble. Athletics has dealt with some of the areas, haven't finished it, they've dealt with some of the areas of misogyny or separation with women in sports. You have Title IX. In society with the Voting Rights Act, we've equalized and had a discussion about race to a certain degree. Those are all ongoing. I think the geek community has lagged in some of those discussions, so it can be hard. But we're open-minded in a way that I think a lot of folks in society are not. And to have those discussions and keep them going is really important.
So, something that pops into mind is, have you seen the show Stranger Things?
Yes.
So,
I know where you're going.
So,
I can almost hear it.
The black character, to me I didn't think twice. I grew up gaming with, most of my gamer friends were black.
Yep.
So, but since Stranger Things became so popular across a wide spectrum, do you think people saw him and they're like, oh, is that real? Or, what do you think that character meant?
That character was me. I'm from North Carolina. I never saw a building with over 10 stories until I moved out of North Carolina. And I was the only black kid in almost every crew I was ever in growing up. And so little things that you might not, maybe as a white kid growing up in a majority white city, you might not even think about, who's going to be Venkman and who's going to be playing Ernie Hudson in the, if you're going to be doing Halloween as the Ghostbusters, right? And you just automatically assume that the black kid wants to be the black character who's a part of that. And it was a really interesting moment in that episode where it they didn't go too deep into it, but it kind of touched on it and it resonated. But yeah, that was my experience. And I think that there are a lot of folks who have had a really, really diverse group, because the diversity, let me be very clear, the diversity is in the fandom. You go to any medium or large scale convention outside of Grinnell, Iowa or something like that, you're going to see every race, gender, color, ethnicity, orientation, gender identity included. But the discussions and debates between those different communities within the larger geek community at an event don't necessarily happen unless they are written into the structure of the con. So there's got to be panels, and there's got to be certain guests, and there's got to be certain programming to kind of proctor these discussions, because a lot of folks are just so focused on what they're doing because they may only go to one con a year. Everyone else who's out here might be wearing button-up ties and carrying briefcases to work every day, 360 days a year. This 5 days is where they get to be geeks. And they may not want to confront the problems of Western society, when they come in to play games and play Dungeons and Dragons and cosplay and geek out. So if it's not built into the structure, it may not happen organically. And I think that moment with Stranger Things, and since we're talking about Netflix, you're also talking about, characters like Luke Cage, where some of the most popular shows are the ones that confront or are overtly inclusive and diverse in their casts, in their storylines, and, you know, in their writing. And I think the industries are starting to see that maybe there's some value in it, and so we can bank on it. Yeah. That's what we're hoping anyway, right?
Yeah. It's you brought to mind yesterday, I don't know if you know the nerdcore rapper Samus.
Oh, yes.
So it struck me, you know, this whole community is about marginalized people, in a sense. And I thought, watching her, I thought the most marginalized group among marginalized group is a nerd black woman.
Oh, yeah.
So it just struck me that it's almost like that community seems most into it and almost should be catered to the most.
Absolutely,
you know?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, you know, it's even as a black man, which you haven't defined me as on here, so for radio listeners or people on the podcast, is I am a black man, I still enjoy male privilege, right? And even though there's you know, exclusionary elements in America that, you know, as me as a black man, I might experience discrimination or unfair treatment. When I'm standing next to a black woman, she gets all the negative, you know, that comes with society's treatment of African Americans on top of misogyny, you know, so she gets a little added layer of icing on her cake. And so you're right. And one of the things that we try to do is highlight as many women of color and of diverse backgrounds as possible to perform or do panels or cosplay, because they are strong members of the community, the geek community, because anyone who's been pushed down has to have stronger legs to resist that.
Right.
So when you take that weight off of them, they spring up, right? Yeah. So if you give an opportunity for an African-American woman to take a stage like a Samus and just really get the stage, get the mic, have that platform, they just have so much to share. They have so much of themselves that they get to share, the positive, the negative, the raw, and you know, we hope to have more and more opportunities to do that as we grow as a con, and hopefully inspire other conventions to take on little patches of what they see with the Blerdcon and say, oh, that's how we could do this, and oh, there's a market for that, and we don't have to be the test tube for it. So let's bring Samus, and let's bring Mega Ran, let's bring, you know, these guests, and let our audience share in what, you know, Blerdcon or any other convention is shown to be successful. So, you know, maybe we could be the incubator for some of this stuff too.
Yeah. How did your success at the first Blerdcon change the process for the second one?
Well, the first con, we had no idea what was going to work. As you could probably guess, with a new type of convention, there aren't very many templates. You know, with the easiest thing I could have done was to say, I just want to be a black con chair who just makes a generic convention. Because there's a template for that. You can go back to talk to any convention on how to start a first year con. You know, there's a wide array of stuff you can do, and boom, boom, bing, you know, 1 + 1 is 2. With this, you didn't know what was going to work, how the audience was going to respond, you know, where the resistance points were, where the acceleration points were going to be. So we threw the kitchen sink at it. And some things stuck, you know, that spaghetti on the wall, and better than others. So what we're doing now is we know what worked. And we know the audience that's going to come out, and we know what resonated with them. So we are, instead of dealing with 15 different lines of process, we're now working with like 7. And really leaning into them, because we know what's going to work and what's not. Yeah. So it's not necessarily easier, because the same amount of effort is going forward, but it's definitely more focused. Yeah. And I think you'll see a more streamlined operation with year 2. And it also gave us the confidence, because when you have a con that draws in 1,800 people in this first year, that's not typical. Right. And so for vendors and sponsors and other potential partners, advocates, and attendees who might shy away from a first-year con, when they find out that the standard measurement for cons is a successful first year tends to double the attendance in their second, that measurement is something that may bring in more vendors, more partners, and more attendees. So we're going to have more of everything, hopefully, from a programmatic standpoint, budgetary standpoint, volunteers, all of that is part of the people. And so we're seeing some of that surge and that groundswell, because there's folks walking around telling their friends, telling their family, telling their communities and groups, I went to Blerdcon, I had an amazing time, and it was important as well as fun, and you got to come out. So that word of mouth piece is the most important thing, and it's working for us now.
So for the first one, were there any, when you think of all the top problems that you had, are there any problems that people like this time around might say, oh, I don't want to go because of this, but you would respond, no, we fixed it? Like any problems like that you can think of? That,
you know, again, like I was saying earlier, we got really lucky with having the guidance of so many con leaders with 20, 30 years of experience that we missed some of the big landmines and potholes that cons run into.
Yeah.
So we didn't really have any one thing that folks were like, if they knew that had happened, it would be prohibitive.
Yeah.
There are some things that we're going to improve upon. I think that the things that we need to do are things we need to do better as opposed to doing at all. Right. So more signage, with a very diverse group. You need signage for things like, cosplay is not consent. We had that, we want more. Have you asked someone their pronouns today? Things like that kind of set the tone for people's interaction who may not have ever had an interaction with someone who's transgender, or may not have interacted with someone in a discussion about the Latina or Afro-Latina experience in cosplay or anime, right? And say, okay, how do we do an even better job of setting the pillars and the conditions that allow for the individual discussions to take place? Now, we didn't have any structural issues this year, but then again, next year we're just going to have to reinforce that to make sure that even though it didn't happen in year one, we don't have any trouble that a lot of cons run into happen in year two.
Right. Yeah. So you're aware of the sophomore slump kind of thing. You're aware of what might. Absolutely.
Like, we know where we were weak. Yeah. We know where we were vulnerable, and but none of that was really anything that would impact the attendee experience.
Yeah.
Like, we know a better way to do registration now. We have a better sense of how to do badging and security placement and sound and light, and how can we fit more panels and do a better job with tech ops and things like that. So make sure that all the sound is working in all of the rooms when we start. Structural things like when, like for instance, and I don't mind confessing this, we had one day where registration didn't open until 9 a.m., but we had a panel that started at 9 a.m., which, two different committees. Registration's over here, programming's over here. That was a piece where they weren't talking to each other.
Right.
And you had folks who couldn't get in time to really be right on time for a panel they wanted to go to at 9 a.m. because we weren't ginning up the registration process for the people who were coming just on that day, that kind of stuff. So operational, absolutely.
What role do you think the convention has in society?
Well, I think that Geek is a end run around a lot of the built-in, ironed-in, die-in-the-wool programming about prejudice, that we have in this country. A lot of us were raised how we were raised. If you're raised in the church, you might not even know that you have a negative view of homosexuality if you're never in that environment. Geek has allowed people to talk to each other in the fandoms. You guys can't see this, but he's wearing a Star Wars shirt, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm a Star Wars fan, and maybe I never really had a conversation with a white guy about Star Wars, maybe I'm from Brooklyn, who knows, whatever it is, right?
Right.
You and I could have a 20 or 30 minute dialogue on Rogue One and the Last Jedi before we realized that, wait a minute, maybe society was supposed to tell us to avoid each other.
Right.
In a neutral environment.
Right.
But we've already made this connection between us through the fandom, and that's the end run, right? And we're hoping to make it so that we have more of those types of dialogues, because in society, Geek is the last religion. There's no more religions that are going to come in that's going to have an ideology that's going to be universal in a lot of ways, and it's going to touch a lot of lives and change the mindset that is kind of what we need to change in this country. There's no new political parties that are going to come up. Libertarianism had its shot. It didn't quite catch on the way Rand Paul and Ron Paul hoped it would have. Geek is the last one, and if we can capitalize on that in some way to connect people in a community that's going to be so huge in 10, 20 years that it's going to be all of society, maybe we move the needle on how our kids are going to be dealing with bullying and dealing with homophobia and misogyny in gaming and in comic books and in anime and cosplay, and then be conditioned through their fandom so that when they do go out into the world and the workplace, that stuff's written into their DNA that, you know, mistreating somebody because they're different than me is not cool across the board. Start there and build outward.
Yeah.
And if we can do that, we don't have to change the education system. We don't have to write a new Bible. We don't have to, you know, vote in a political party or a certain president because we fixed it ourselves. And I think only we have that chance to do it. I don't see any other place to do it. Some people may disagree, but I think that this is our last shot before the meteor comes. Yeah. So
I might agree there. It's interesting. What movies, books, games, or other creative media in science fiction or fantasy have inspired you?
I was born and raised on Star Wars and comic books. I learned to read reading comic books. Yeah. You know, I collected comic books more than I ate food. You know, and when I didn't have friends, which I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, you know, from age like 5 to 12, you know, living in the country, black kid, you know, out in North Carolina. You know, if you're not friends with your neighbor down the street or around the corner, that's kind of it. So those are the things that really wrote the ground level for me. And then Dungeons and Dragons was my most interactive geek introduction. Yeah. And it kind of, that you know, swords and sorcery, you know, adventure, dungeon master stuff, like, just really swallowed me up. And so when I look out onto this community, this is not something that was available to me as a geek.
Right.
That's not going to be the case for my nephew and my young niece. You know, they decide they want to indulge their geekness. There's going to be many ways for them to do that. As casual as a movie theater, there's going to be geek T-shirts at Macy's. You know, someone had a great T-shirt with Deadpool on it, and I thought they bought it from a vendor. And she's like, "No, I got it at Neiman Marcus." I'm like, "What? Like, what is going on in the world where the geek stuff's hanging on the rack at Neiman Marcus, right? Like, come on, man, you know."
We're taking over.
We're taking over, right? So if we're going to take over, and I said this in our panel last night, because we got about 5 or 10 years before Disney buys everything out. Yeah. So what are we going to do with this? You know, how are we going to do it before we can't? Before Simon and Garfunkel split up. You know, what are we going to do with those albums so that it's written into our DNA, and it's going to be something that we're going to be proud to say that we are that community. Mm-hmm. And we also have to be welcoming too. You know, all these new fans, they're new. You know, and the only thing they may know about comic books may come from the MCU. Right. But we also don't have to be, we don't want to be gatekeepers either. You know, we want to embrace the growth of geek while still guiding the growth of geek. And if we can do that, I think we're going to be really happy in the next 5 or 10 years as we see everything just completely explode. And we're going to be proud to wear these shirts, even if we disagree with certain parts of the plot and argue about whether or not Empire is the best sequel of any movie anywhere in history, or is the Phantom Menace really universally sucking. You know, those things we'll debate, but we'll do it together, and it'll be a positive thing, and we'll hold hands at the end. That's my hope.
Star Trek 2 is the best sequel. I don't think there's a debate.
Oh, yeah. Come on, man. I don't like to lose. I don't believe in the no-win scenario. Yeah. I drive my family crazy when that comes on. I quote every line. Yeah. They're like, will you shut up? I'll chase him around. No, let me stop.
So Empire's, yes, it's definitely a good one too. So do you have any, what's your big future, like, long-term conquer the world plan?
Oh, yes.
Or, what goal do you have?
You can't see. I'm steepling my fingers like Mr. Burns as he speaks. You know, this is for Blerdcon, I want us to be the Dragoncon of the North. Yes. Where we're located, if you ever get a chance to come out and see the neighborhood or the lack thereof, it's very corporate. After 4:30 on a Friday, it's empty. Yeah. But there's lots of hotels, mass transit, restaurants, things like that. It's prime to be the hotel center, be the Hyatt. But when we outgrow, air quotes, the Hyatt, instead of leaving the Hyatt and coming to the National Harbor or going to the DC Convention Center, we just expand it so that it's in 2 hotels. And then when we outgrow that, we go to 3 hotels, kind of like Dragoncon. Yeah. And it takes more of a festival, personality, where there's programming and things happening at multiple indoor venues for which we can control access and things like that. But there's so much happening in between. And with us being in the summertime and being in the north, being a city center with all of the components, over 1 million people just being in the area who live in the DC metro area.
Yeah.
You know, you have mass transit, airports, rail. People can get to it very easily. We're not too far south. We're not too far north where the weather patterns would make it, you know, not something that you could actually participate in or you know, whatever. So being the Dragoncon of the North in 10 years is in the business plan. We've already spoken with the mayor's office and the you know, the Arlington and Crystal City business district to tell them that's the long-term plan.
Yeah.
Nobody flinched. Nobody stopped smiling when I said it. So fingers and toes crossed.
Yeah.
You know, we'll be too big for our britches real soon.
All right. And then Disney will buy it.
And then Disney will buy it, right? You get it?
Yeah.
We'll all sell out. We are Sexpo Bombs. We're here to sell out.
It's inevitable. That's all the questions I have. Any final thoughts or comments?
Magfest was a blast. This interview was a blast.
Thank you.
We have, you know, just so many. This is as close to family reunion, because I don't have them, as I get, is coming out to cons and meeting new people and connecting with folks.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, there's a connection and a love and an energy in our community that you can't find anywhere else. And the mission is to try and bring as many people into this community and this universal man hug as we can as we can bring about.
Okay.
So if we can do that at cons like this and through discussions like we're having now, I'm set, man. I have no more wishes. You know, I don't need that fourth wish with the lamp.
All right. So what's the website? Like, where can you get more info on
absolutely.
Blerdcon?
www.blerdcon.com. That's BLERDCON.com. We are on Instagram. We are on Twitter. All Blerdcon hashtags. We have a Facebook page, Facebook group, Facebook event. We're pretty well social media established, and all the information anyone would have is there. Keep an eye on us because we're doing all of our guest announcements and all the details and promotions and contests will be there and on social media. So www.blerdcon.com. Come see us. We'd love to have you.
And it's on, the dates of the convention are
July 27th through 29th, 2018 at the Hyatt Regency Crystal City. This is a 24-hour con. We do not sleep. 24-hour programming and gaming, 24-hour programming and anime screening, karaoke sung poorly will be around the clock, so get your living on a prayer lungs ready because that thing's going to come around 7 times an hour, and we're going to have a lot of fun. The hotel room rate is only $99 a night. It's a 4-star hotel. It's amazing.
Nice. Yeah.
And our full weekend badge is only $50.
Yeah. And that's Washington, D.C. area, so that's definitely that's good.
It's a real coup. They're real happy to have us, and they're doing everything they can to make it work. So take advantage of it, man. You know, if you can do it without breaking a $200 bill, come on out.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you. Thank you for speaking with me.
Anytime. I appreciate it. You can't tell right now, but we're shaking hands. There you go.
Thanks. Please visit chrisalvarez.com for more cool stuff. You can also find my website and social media information in the podcast show notes. Thanks for listening and keep imagining the future.